Welcome to our deep dive into the fascinating world of Israeli crowdfunding. We've got some excerpts from academic papers all about what makes it so successful.
Good.
I'm excited to explore this, especially because it's not just about clicking a button online, right?
Right.
There's a whole cultural backstory here.
You're absolutely right. We're going to uncover how deep the roots of this phenomenon go in Israeli history and culture. It's way more than just the tech scene.
Yeah, from what I've seen in these sources, it's almost like crowdfunding was baked into the community centuries ago.
That's a great way to put it. In fact, there's this system called prenumeranten that was used by Western European Jews in the 18th and 19th centuries.
Prenumeranten. Okay, that's definitely not a word I hear every day.
It means prior numbers in Yiddish. Imagine this.
Mm-hmm.
Back then, printing a book was a huge expense. So Jewish authors would literally travel around to different communities and gather pledges from people who were interested in their work.
Ah, so it was like a super early personalized version of pre-ordering a book. I can see how that builds a sense of community around the project.
Exactly. And those who pledged the Prenumeranten would even get their names printed in the first edition.
Sure.
It was a way to acknowledge their support and also, frankly, helped ensure the author could actually afford to print the thing. This really highlights the deeply ingrained cultural value of community support within Jewish communities.
That's incredible. It makes you realize that modern crowdfunding isn't some brand new invention,
Right.
but this evolution of practices that have been around for ages, like the spirit of it was always there.
And it goes beyond just history. Even mandatory military service in the Israel Defense Forces, the IDF, plays a role.
Whoa, okay, that's a connection I wouldn't have made right away. What does the military have to do with crowdfunding?
Think about the skills and mindset the IDF fosters. Innovation, adaptability, a real can-do attitude. Soldiers are constantly trained to think outside the box, take risks, and work together under pressure.
So those are the same qualities you need to launch a successful crowdfunding campaign,
Mhm.
or really any kind of startup.
Absolutely. It's no coincidence that many successful Israeli entrepreneurs point to their military experience as foundational. Plus, the IDF focuses on figuring out people's strengths and using them, so it's less about rigid hierarchy and more about everyone contributing.
Which is probably where that chutzpah we see in Israeli startups comes from, right? At
Okay.
least that's what one of these papers mentioned.
Chutzpah is a fantastic word. It's that bold, daring, even somewhat unconventional spirit that Israelis are known for. Think of it as the guts to go for big goals, even if it means risking failure along the way.
Which, let's be honest, happens all the time in the startup world.
And that's the key point. In Israeli culture, failure isn't the end. It's seen as a chance to learn and try again. That kind of resilience is essential for innovation.
Okay, so we've got this foundation of community support going way back, combined with the unique mindset that comes from military service,
Right.
PLUS, a healthy acceptance of failure. No wonder Israeli crowdfunding thrives.
It creates this incredibly fertile ground. And there are some amazing examples in our sources that really bring these factors to life.
Ooh, I love a good story. Tell me about some of these standout crowdfunding campaigns that show these principles in action.
Well, one that really struck me was the Bringing Yehuda Back Home campaign. Yehuda was an IDS officer who was very seriously injured while serving. To be able to return home, he needed a custom-built living unit, which was, of course, incredibly expensive.
I can already guess what happened next. The community stepped up.
Big time. They launched this crowdfunding campaign aiming to raise about $171,400. Get this. They hit their goal in just 18 hours. And in the end, they raised over $447,400 from more than 8,000 people.
Wow, that's amazing. It shows what can happen when people come together with a common goal.
Exactly. And this wasn't just a one-off. This same spirit is alive in campaigns supporting families who've been affected by terrorism, cultural projects like a memorial concert for a famous musician, even funding cutting-edge space exploration.
Wait, space exploration. Now that I did not see coming. How did crowdfunding get involved in that?
This is where that Israeli chutzpah shines. 3 young engineers had this wild dream. They wanted to enter the Google Lunar X Prize competition to land an unmanned spacecraft on the moon.
Talk about ambitious.
Yeah.
Did they actually pull it off?
Well, they launched an Indiegogo campaign back in 2014 and raised over $250,000, which was more than they had hoped for. That initial boost not only gave them some cash, but helped attract volunteers, scientists, and even big-time investors.
So crowdfunding was like the launch pad for something much bigger.
Exactly. Though sadly, the spacecraft, named Bereshit, ended up crash landing on the moon. Still, it was a huge symbolic win for Israel. It showed they're willing to take on these crazy challenges, think creatively, and not give up even when things go wrong.
The Beresheet Project really embodies what we've been talking about, this blend of community support,
Hmm.
bold thinking, and resilience. It's inspiring to see how crowdfunding can fuel these huge, out-of-this-world dreams, literally.
Absolutely. Now, those were some individual stories.
Right.
Let's zoom out a bit and look at the bigger picture of the Israeli crowdfunding scene.
Okay, so how did all the different types of crowdfunding take root in Israel?
Where rewards-based and donation-based crowdfunding really got going around 2011, then equity crowdfunding followed in 2013.
I'm guessing the rise of platforms like Kickstarter and Indiegogo in the US had something to do with that.
Definitely. Those platforms provided a model and inspiration. But here's the thing that might surprise you. The leading type of crowdfunding in Israel, by far, is actually equity crowdfunding.
Really? That's unexpected. I would figured rewards-based would be bigger,
Right.
given how accessible it is and those success stories we just talked about.
It might seem counterintuitive, but remember that strong entrepreneurial spirit we discussed. Equity crowdfunding allows everyday Israelis to invest in promising startups and be part of the next big success story. Taps right into that.
Ah, I see. It's like giving ordinary people a chance to be venture capitalists. So how does equity crowdfunding actually work in Israel? Are there specific rules?
There are indeed. Initially, Israel's securities law had some exemptions that allowed equity crowdfunding to operate without needing approval from the Israel Securities Authority, ISA. For example, offerings to a limited number of investors or offerings exclusively to sophisticated investors like venture capital funds.
So there were ways to work within the system, even if it wasn't specifically designed for crowdfunding.
Exactly. But then in 2015, things changed. An amendment to the securities law specifically addressed crowdfunding and introduced the offering coordinator model. This new model allows companies to openly offer shares to the public through platforms that are officially authorized.
Okay, so that sounds like a big step towards making equity crowdfunding more accessible for both startups and investors.
It was a significant development. However, there's still some limitations in place. Companies can only raise a certain amount of money, and individual investors have caps on how much they can invest in each campaign and each year.
So it's about striking that balance between opening up opportunities while also making sure investors are protected.
What about the platforms themselves? Are there any big players in the Israeli equity crowdfunding space?
Our Crowd is a major player, and they operate both as a venture capital fund and an equity crowdfunding platform. They've raised billions of dollars and have a global reach. Another notable platform is Exit Valley, which focuses on connecting startups with both accredited and non-accredited investors.
It's amazing to see how equity crowdfunding has come so far in Israel. From finding ways around regulations to having a dedicated framework in place, it really shows how important this funding model has become.
Absolutely. But it goes beyond just the money. Equity crowdfunding taps into those cultural values we've been talking about.
Oh.
The desire to support innovation and be part of something bigger than yourself.
I'm also curious about the rewards and donations side of things. We talked about a few successful campaigns,
Right.
but what's the overall landscape like in Israel? Head Start is the undisputed leader for rewards and donations crowdfunding. They've got a big chunk of the market and have helped thousands of campaigns raise millions of dollars.
One of the articles mentioned Head Start and how their campaign for the Mayor Ariel Memorial Concert was a turning point in raising awareness for crowdfunding in Israel.
That's right. That campaign was a huge success and showed the potential of crowdfunding to support cultural projects. Head Start has played a key role in educating people about crowdfunding and making it a mainstream option in Israel.
I also read that they've evolved as a platform, even creating specialized sub-platforms like Give Back for donations and Be Active for legal battles.
That kind of specialization is a key trend we're seeing in the Israeli crowdfunding landscape. Platforms are finding their niche and catering to specific needs, whether it's for creators or investors. For example, Fundit specializes in real estate equity crowdfunding.
Makes sense. As the market matures, you'd expect to see this kind of segmentation. It allows platforms to offer more targeted services and expertise.
Exactly. And we're also seeing a trend towards internationalization. Israeli entrepreneurs are launching campaigns on global platforms like Kickstarter and Indiegogo to reach wider audiences. And at the same time, foreign companies are investing in local Israeli platforms, recognizing the potential of this market.
So it's a two-way street. Israeli crowdfunding is going global, and global players are recognizing the value of the Israeli ecosystem. That's impressive.
It really is a testament to that innovative spirit and entrepreneurial drive we talked about earlier.
Now, you mentioned earlier that regulatory barriers were a challenge for Israeli crowdfunding. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, even though Israel has made progress in creating a regulatory framework for equity crowdfunding, there are still some areas that need further development. While the existing regulations have good intentions, they can be seen as overly complex or burdensome, especially for smaller startups.
It's that classic struggle.
Mm.
How do you find the right balance between encouraging innovation and protecting investors?
Exactly. And there's always room for improvement. The Israeli crowdfunding scene is dynamic and always evolving, so I'm sure we'll see adjustments to the regulations as the market continues to grow.
It's fascinating to see how intertwined Israeli crowdfunding is with the country's history, culture, and that strong entrepreneurial spirit. It's not just about raising funds, it's about a collective belief in innovation and supporting each other's big dreams.
Well said. This deep dive into Israeli crowdfunding is really valuable for anyone who wants to understand the power of community, the impact of cultural values on innovation, and the evolving landscape of alternative finance.
It's a story about resilience, creativity, and a unique approach to problem solving that can inspire entrepreneurs and investors around the world.
It raises a crucial question.
Yeah.
How can we take what we've learned from Israeli crowdfunding and create similar ecosystems of innovation and support in other parts of the world?
That's a great question to ponder. So as we wrap up part one,
Yeah.
what are some key takeaways for our listeners?
I think the biggest takeaway is the power of community. Israeli crowdfunding thrives on a deep-rooted sense of collective support and a willingness to help others succeed, whether it's donating to a cause, investing in a startup, or simply spreading the word about a campaign. Every contribution matters.
Totally agree. And it goes beyond money. It's about mentoring, sharing expertise, and creating a culture where it's okay to fail because that's how we learn and grow.
Another key takeaway is the importance of that chutzpah we were talking about, that boldness and willingness to challenge conventions. Israeli entrepreneurs aren't afraid to dream big and go for ambitious goals, even if it means taking risks.
And that ties into their high tolerance for failure, right? It's not seen as a setback, but as a learning experience. That mindset is so important for fostering innovation and pushing the boundaries of what's possible.
Absolutely. And finally, I think it's important to remember that crowdfunding is about more than just raising money. It's about building communities, fostering connections, and creating a sense of shared ownership in something bigger than ourselves.
Well said. Israeli crowdfunding really shows what human ingenuity and collaboration can achieve when people come together with a shared purpose.
And for you, our listener, I hope this deep dive has sparked some new ideas, whether you're an entrepreneur yourself or simply fascinated by how culture and innovation intertwine.
And before we move on, I have to point out something we haven't discussed yet. The potential downsides of having exit strategies so deeply ingrained in the startup culture.
That's a great point. It's something to think about. Does prioritizing a quick sale always lead to the most impactful innovations?
That's a thought-provoking question to leave our listeners with. Food for thought.
Absolutely. There's always more to explore.
Join us for part two, where we'll dive into some specific examples of successful Israeli crowdfunding campaigns, from pharmaceuticals to vegan chocolate.
Welcome back to our deep dive into Israeli crowdfunding. Before the break, we were talking about the cultural and historical factors that have contributed to its success. Now, I think it's time to explore some specific examples of Israeli companies that have used crowdfunding to achieve remarkable things.
I'm all for that. I'm ready to be inspired. The source material mentions a company called Inocan Pharma. What's their story?
Inocan Pharma is a great example of how Israeli startups combine scientific innovation with a bold, go-for-it attitude. They're an early-stage pharmaceutical company focused on developing cannabis-based dermatological products.
So they're working in a pretty cutting-edge field.
Mm-hmm.
And I imagine the pharmaceutical industry is notoriously competitive, right?
You're absolutely right. It's a highly competitive and regulated industry, typically dominated by big, established companies. Not exactly an easy market to break into.
That's where that Israeli chutzpah we talked about comes in, I bet. They weren't afraid to take on a big challenge.
Exactly. Inocan's founders were a team of experienced entrepreneurs and pharmaceutical experts, led by a former CEO of Teva Israel, a major pharmaceutical company. They definitely had the experience and expertise, but even with that, it takes a certain level of audacity to enter such a challenging market.
It sounds like they had a good blend of experience, expertise, and that can-do spirit. So how did they decide to use crowdfunding?
Well, they saw a unique opportunity to leverage innovative technologies to shorten the drug development timeline and bring cannabis-based products to market faster. But they needed funding to make it happen. So in 2018, they launched an equity crowdfunding campaign on the PipeBiz platform with the goal of raising about $285,700.
And what was the response like? Did investors buy into their vision?
It did. In fact, they exceeded their funding goal significantly, raising around $857,100 from over 500 investors. That's more than 3 times what they initially set out to raise.
Wow, that's impressive. It seems like investors had confidence in their team and the potential of their products.
And I think another key factor was their approach to the campaign. Remember when we talked about low power distance in Israeli culture? The CEO at Inacan was incredibly accessible throughout the campaign. She personally spoke with potential investors, answering questions and addressing concerns.
That's a pretty big contrast to the stereotypical image of a CEO who's distant and unreachable.
Exactly. This personal touch and willingness to directly engage with investors built trust and made people feel like they were truly part of the journey. It was a great example of that egalitarian spirit we discussed earlier.
It sounds like they had a winning combination. A strong team, a bold vision, and a smart approach to crowdfunding. So what happened after the campaign? Did Inacan reach their goals?
They did. They used the funds to advance their research and development, and in 2019, they successfully went public on the Canadian Securities Exchange.
That's amazing. So everyone who invested in that crowdfunding campaign became a shareholder in a publicly traded company.
That's right. Inacan's story is a perfect example of how equity crowdfunding can give early-stage companies the fuel they need to grow and achieve significant milestones. It also highlights the importance of having a strong team, a bold vision, and the tenacity to persevere through challenges.
Inacan's story is really inspiring, and it perfectly captures what makes Israeli crowdfunding so unique. Now, let's switch gears from pharmaceuticals to something a little more delicious. The source material also mentions a company called Chocolate Panda. What can you tell me about them?
Chocolate Panda. They're a wonderful example of how crowdfunding can turn a passion project into a thriving business. They make delicious vegan chocolate. The company was founded in 2015 by a couple who simply wanted to create high-quality vegan chocolate that everyone could enjoy.
So it started as a small homegrown operation, fueled by their passion for vegan chocolate.
Exactly. They initially planned to launch a home-based business, but they needed some startup capital. They decided to launch a rewards-based crowdfunding campaign on Head Start, hoping to raise around $8,500 to get things going.
What happened? Did they reach their goal?
They did, and then some. Their campaign went viral. Within a single day, they had reached their funding goal, and by the time the campaign ended, they had raised over $57,000 from over 2,300 backers.
Wow, that's a phenomenal response. Their initial goal was pretty modest, and they blew it out of the water. What do you think contributed to their success?
Well, it speaks to the power of community and the growing support for veganism in Israel. The vegan community really rallied around Chocolate Panda, excited to support a company that aligned with their values.
It seems like it was about more than just a desire for delicious chocolate. It was about supporting a business that reflected their lifestyle and ethics.
Absolutely. And this initial success gave Chocolate Panda the confidence and resources to expand beyond their initial home-based plans. They used the funds to set up a small factory and began producing a variety of delicious vegan chocolate products.
That's fantastic. It shows how crowdfunding can be a catalyst for growth, allowing entrepreneurs to scale their operations much faster than they might have imagined.
Exactly. And Chocolate Panda didn't stop there. They continued to engage with their backers, providing updates on their progress, and even launching another successful campaign in 2017 to fund the development of new vegan chocolate snacks.
It sounds like they really understood the importance of building a strong community around their brand.
They did. Their community became a key ingredient in their success. Their story shows how crucial it is to build genuine connections with backers and make them feel like they're part of the journey.
It's a great example of how crowdfunding can be used for more than just launching a new product or service. It's a powerful tool for building brand awareness, testing market demand, and gathering valuable feedback from your target audience.
It is. And both the Inacan Pharma and Chocolate Panda campaigns demonstrate the effectiveness of crowdfunding in different sectors and for achieving different goals.
They also highlight the adaptability and resourcefulness of Israeli entrepreneurs, who are clearly not afraid to embrace new funding models and leverage technology to achieve their goals.
That's a key observation. Now, speaking of leveraging technology, let's talk about some of the key trends shaping the future of Israeli crowdfunding.
Okay, trends. What's on the horizon for Israeli crowdfunding? What exciting developments should we be watching?
One trend that's already becoming clear is specialization. We touched on this earlier, but it's worth emphasizing. Platforms are increasingly focusing on specific niches to cater to the diverse needs of both creators and investors.
Right, we talked about Head Start's sub-platforms and Fundit's focus on real estate.
Mhm.
Are there any other examples of this specialization trend that you've
If
noticed?
there are. In the equity crowdfunding space, PipeLeBiz has partnered with Everest Investment Banking to launch Canna VC, a venture capital fund that specifically supports Israeli companies working in the cannabis technology sector.
Interesting. So they're tapping into a rapidly growing market with a dedicated funding vehicle.
Exactly. They're recognizing that investors are looking for more specialized opportunities, and they're creating platforms to meet that demand.
Mm.
And remember, our crowd. They've also launched internal funds with a specific focus, one on medical investments and another on environmental impact investments.
It seems like this specialization allows platforms to develop deeper expertise in particular areas and attract investors who are passionate about those specific sectors.
Precisely. It's about creating a more tailored and targeted approach to crowdfunding, which ultimately benefits both startups and investors.
Makes sense. It's like the crowdfunding landscape is maturing and becoming more sophisticated. What other trends are you seeing?
Another significant trend is internationalization. We touched on this briefly before, but it's worth exploring further. Israeli entrepreneurs are increasingly looking beyond their borders, launching campaigns on global platforms like Kickstarter and Indiegogo to reach wider audiences and tap into a larger pool of potential investors.
So they're not limiting themselves to the domestic market anymore. They're
Mhm.
thinking globally from the start.
Exactly. And it's not just a one-way street. We're also seeing foreign companies investing in Israeli crowdfunding platforms. They recognize the incredible potential of the Israeli startup ecosystem.
It's like Israeli crowdfunding is becoming more and more integrated into the global innovation landscape.
It absolutely is. And this cross-border collaboration and exchange of ideas is beneficial for everyone involved. It helps spread innovation and creates new opportunities.
So far, we've identified specialization and internationalization as key trends shaping the future of Israeli crowdfunding.
Right.
Do you have any other predictions or insights into what lies ahead?
I think it's safe to say that we'll continue to see technological advancements that will make crowdfunding even more accessible, efficient, and transparent.
Can you give me some specific examples of what these advancements might look like?
Blockchain technology, for example, could play a bigger role. It has the potential to streamline the investment process and enhance security, making it even easier and safer for people to participate in crowdfunding.
Yeah.
Artificial intelligence could also be used to analyze data and better match investors with projects that align with their interests and investment goals.
So, technology will continue to drive the evolution of crowdfunding, making it more efficient and user friendly.
Absolutely. And beyond the technological advancements, I also predict that we'll see a growing emphasis on impact investing. This means that investors will increasingly seek to support projects that not only offer financial returns, but also address social or environmental challenges.
That's a trend we're seeing across the entire investment landscape.
Hmm.
People want their investments to reflect their values and make a positive impact on the world.
Exactly. And I think Israeli crowdfunding, with its strong focus on community and social responsibility, is well positioned to lead the way in impact investing.
It's fascinating to consider the possibilities and how Israeli crowdfunding will continue to evolve and shape the future of innovation. But amidst all this talk of technology, global trends, and market dynamics, I think it's important to remember that at its heart, crowdfunding is still about people.
You're absolutely right. Crowdfunding is ultimately about individuals coming together to support ideas they believe in and make a positive impact on the world.
That's a powerful reminder that innovation is not just about technology or financial resources. It's about human connection, collaboration, and a shared belief in the power of ideas to change the world.
Well said. Now, before we wrap up part two of our deep dive, let's shift our focus to another important aspect of the Israeli entrepreneurial landscape, the concept of exit strategies.
Okay, exit strategies. Why are they so significant in the Israeli startup culture? What makes them different from other startup ecosystems around the world?
The source material highlights that the concept of an exit, usually through acquisition by a larger company or an initial public offering, IPO, is deeply ingrained in the Israeli startup ecosystem. It's often seen as the ultimate measure of success, even more so than building a long-lasting independent company.
So instead of focusing on building a sustainable business for the long term, the priority is often on creating something that will be acquired by a larger company. Why is that?
There are a few reasons for this. First, Israel's domestic market is relatively small, This encourages startups to target global audiences from the beginning, which makes them attractive acquisition targets for international companies looking to expand their reach.
That makes sense. Israeli startups are known for their innovation and cutting-edge technology, so they're valuable assets for companies seeking to enter new markets or gain a competitive edge.
Exactly. Second, many Israeli entrepreneurs have a strong military background, which instills a mindset of completing missions efficiently and then moving on to the next challenge.
It's like achieving a strategic objective and then seeking out the next battle to win.
That's a great analogy. And third, the venture capital landscape in Israel often incentivizes quick exits. It allows investors to realize returns on their investments more rapidly and reinvest those funds into new ventures.
So it's a combination of market dynamics, cultural influences, and the financial incentives of the venture capital world that have shaped this focus on exit strategies in Israel.
Precisely. However, it's important to note that this emphasis on exits isn't without its critics.
What are some of the downsides of prioritizing exits over long-term growth?
Some argue that this focus on quick exits can sometimes come at the expense of creating truly sustainable and impactful businesses. The focus might shift to making the company appealing to potential acquirers rather than building something that will stand the test of time and have a lasting impact on the market.
So the short-term goal of being acquired might overshadow the long-term vision of building a truly innovative and disruptive company.
Exactly. And there's also concern that if a startup is acquired too early, its innovative potential might be stifled or diluted within the larger corporate structure.
It seems like a complex issue with both advantages and disadvantages.
It definitely is. It's something that entrepreneurs, investors, and policymakers need to carefully consider as they navigate the Israeli startup ecosystem. There's no easy answer, and the best approach likely depends on the specific circumstances of each company and the broader market dynamics.
It's a thought-provoking aspect of the Israeli crowdfunding and entrepreneurial landscape. And it makes me wonder how this emphasis on exits might influence the types of projects that seek funding through crowdfunding.
That's a great question. And it leads us perfectly into the final part of our deep dive, where we'll explore the broader implications of Israeli crowdfunding for the global innovation landscape. Join us after the break.
Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into Israeli crowdfunding. We've covered a lot of ground, from the historical roots of this phenomenon to the cultural values that fuel it, and even explored some inspiring success stories.
We've also touched on some of the unique aspects of the Israeli startup ecosystem, like the emphasis on exit strategies.
Now, I'm curious to zoom out even further and consider the broader implications of Israeli crowdfunding for the global innovation landscape. What lessons can other countries and ecosystems learn from Israel's experience?
That's a great question, and I think there's a lot that other countries can learn from Israel. One of the most important takeaways is the power of creating a supportive ecosystem that encourages collaboration and risk-taking.
So it's not just about copying and pasting specific crowdfunding models, but about cultivating the right environment for innovation to flourish.
Exactly. Israel has done an exceptional job of creating a culture that embraces entrepreneurship, encourages mentorship, and provides access to resources and funding. There's a real sense of community and a shared belief in the power of innovation to drive progress.
We talked earlier about the unique role the IDF plays in shaping this culture. It instills values of innovation, adaptability, and leadership in a way that few other institutions can.
That's right. While other countries might not have mandatory military service like Israel, they can still learn from the IDF's approach to training and developing talent. It's about fostering a can-do attitude and empowering individuals to take initiative, solve problems creatively, and work effectively in teams.
The concept of collective individualism, which we discussed earlier, also seems crucial. It's this balance between individual drive and a strong sense of community support that creates a powerful dynamic.
Absolutely. Israeli society values both individual achievement and a collective responsibility to support each other's success. This creates a powerful network of support for entrepreneurs and innovators, where collaboration is as important as competition.
So it's not just about individual companies vying for success, but about a shared understanding that innovation benefits society as a whole.
Precisely. And I think other countries can also learn from Israel's approach to regulation. While it's essential to have safeguards in place to protect investors, overly burdensome regulations can stifle innovation and discourage investment.
It's about finding that sweet spot, that delicate balance between fostering a vibrant and dynamic entrepreneurial environment while also ensuring responsible practices and protecting investors.
Exactly. Israel has made significant progress in creating a regulatory framework for crowdfunding that strikes this balance. It encourages investment while also mitigating risks and protecting investors.
And it's important to remember that the crowdfunding landscape is constantly evolving. Israel has shown a willingness to adapt and refine its regulations as the market matures, which is essential for staying ahead of the curve.
That's right. Flexibility and responsiveness are key. The regulations need to evolve alongside the market to meet the changing needs of both entrepreneurs and investors.
We've discussed many positive aspects of the Israeli crowdfunding ecosystem, but are there any potential challenges or areas for improvement?
That's a great point. No system is perfect, and there are always areas where we can improve. One challenge that's often discussed in relation to the Israeli startup ecosystem is the issue of inclusivity and diversity. While Israel has made progress in supporting women entrepreneurs and promoting Arab-led startups, there's still work to be done to ensure that opportunities are equally accessible to all segments of society.
So it's about making sure that everyone has the chance to participate in the innovation economy and that the benefits of crowdfunding are shared more broadly.
Exactly. Inclusivity is not just a matter of fairness. It's also essential for fostering a truly vibrant and dynamic innovation ecosystem.
Are there any other challenges that you see?
Another potential challenge is the risk of market saturation. As crowdfunding becomes increasingly popular, it's important to ensure that the quality of the projects and the due diligence processes remain strong. We need to avoid a situation where there are too many projects vying for funding and investors become overwhelmed or make hasty decisions.
It's about maintaining a healthy balance between encouraging participation and making sure that investors are making informed decisions and that the system as a whole remains sustainable.
Absolutely. But overall, I think Israeli crowdfunding offers a compelling and inspiring model for other countries that are looking to foster innovation and support entrepreneurship.
It's a real-world demonstration of how culture, history, technology, and a forward-thinking approach to regulation can come together to create a thriving ecosystem of innovation.
It truly is. And for you, our listener, I hope this deep dive has given you a new appreciation for the power of human ingenuity and the potential of crowdfunding to fuel innovation and positive change. Perhaps you've even been inspired to explore crowdfunding for your own ventures or to support innovative projects in your community.
That would be fantastic. Remember, innovation knows no boundaries. The lessons we can learn from the Israeli crowdfunding experience are relevant to anyone who is passionate about supporting creativity, problem solving, and building a better future.
Well said. The Israeli crowdfunding story is a reminder that with the right blend of ingenuity, community support, and a willingness to embrace bold ideas, we can achieve remarkable things.
That's a great takeaway. Thank you for joining us on this fascinating exploration of Israeli crowdfunding. I hope you've enjoyed this deep dive as much as we have.